So Massachusetts and a number of other states are now considering registries for animal abusers, modeling them after sex offender registries. Do you think these are a good idea? Will they stop animal abuse? Bob Ferber, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Lori.
Bob, what are the goals of these registries?
Well, the original goal of the sex offender registries was a tool for law enforcement to help them if there was a violent, like a rape or a sexual attack against somebody or a child molester. They would have a tool to be able to look back at people that have already been convicted and use them and investigate them, talk to them. So it was a pool of people that might be suspects. But the function of it expanded when Megan's Law in California, which is a rather famous law about a child molester and killer, it became available. People wanted to make this information available to the public. And so now this registry, and I believe it's true in a lot of other states, you can find out who has been registered as a sex offender and who lives in your neighborhood. So I think the goal is twofold. It was originally law enforcement, and then it got expanded to let people know that, be cautious. Somebody down the street is a convicted sex offender. Watch your children if they're walking to school or something to that effect.
Hey, Bob, it's Peter. How you doing?
Good, Peter.
So is the analogy with these registries for animal abusers to the sex offender registries, is that appropriate? Is this an extension of that thinking?
I think it's applicable, Peter, to animal abusers, and in two ways. Number one, law enforcement can use a list of animal abusers to be able to investigate other cases of animal cruelty. I have one right now where they're trying to find out somebody whoever mutilated some dogs and cats in a neighborhood. So that it would be helpful if we had a registry so police could go back and look. Is anybody in the neighborhood already been convicted of that? But I think the way sex offender registries help the neighbors to know who's next door, I think with animal abusers, the key way it can help is to prevent people from getting more animals. And this means that these registries or this information needs to be available to shelters, to rescue groups, to maybe even pet stores, although I'm not personally in favor of stores that sell animals, but if they do, maybe at least they should have access to make sure that they're not selling it to somebody who's been convicted of animal cruelty.
And breeders as well, Bob?
Well, I think we all three agree that, we have some issues with breeders.
Right, absolutely.
But my feeling is no matter who it is, if you're transferring an animal to someone else, right, it would be helpful if you, whoever you are, whether you're a breeder, you're a hardcore rescuer, you're a shelter worker, to be able to know that whoever's taking the animal, at the very least, is not convicted of animal cruelty. My fear with animal cruelty is that animal cruelty laws also include things where people have done something that was, yes, it was a crime, but it's not something where they're a danger to the public. They may have, we have a lot of cases of animal neglect where people are guilty of the crime, but they did it because they couldn't take care of their animal because of money, because of a personal situation, because of something where they delegated it to someone else, something where they should be held accountable, but are they a danger to somebody else? Are they somebody that all rescue groups need to know about because of maybe an isolated incident? So we have to worry about, if there's a registry, how do you define who's in that registry of animal abusers and who isn't? And right now, the same with the sex offender registries. It's not really, there's lawyers and legislators haven't come up with a good way to just keep these registries to the people that we really want to know about. So I think that's what we have to figure out.
No one hesitates.
And another problem, by the way, with these registries is that for privacy reasons, you can find out, for example, if there's a sex offender down the street from you in California, but you can't find out what they did. You can't find out if they were a rapist, if they were a flasher. Same thing with if you have somebody down the street that's an animal abuser. Wouldn't you want to know, was it dog fighting? Was it beating an animal, poisoning an animal, or was it something where they didn't give their dog enough food because they were having money problems and the dog, or they didn't have the medication for an animal.
Yes, I'd want to know, but either way, I wouldn't want that person living next door to me.
Well, and that's a fair statement, but you can see how it dilutes the effectiveness of it for law enforcement. And I agree with there's an argument to be made, Lori, that the person who neglected a dog, I might want them down the street from me because maybe I could make sure check on them. Maybe they're not a physical danger to me. I've certainly educated a number of people in my life who have been neighbors and friends who weren't doing what I thought was the appropriate thing for an animal, and they're like, "Oh, thanks, Bob." Well, I see your point, Lori, and I probably agree with you that I don't want any animal abusers in my neighborhood. I've had numerous people as a prosecutor who were convicted of animal abuse, but everybody agreed that this shouldn't get in the way of them being able to adopt another animal in the future because, let's say, they took a course or they took a class in better animal care, or they made better arrangements to make sure that when they're taking care of their sick mother that there's somebody to care for their animal.
Well, we sure didn't hesitate to allow Michael Vick adopt another animal.
I know, and that's a really good, and that involves other legislation that we've talked about on your show about if you're convicted of animal abuse, should you be allowed to adopt another animal? And I think in a good way, states around the country are starting to include it in their animal cruelty laws that you can't have another animal if you've been convicted of certain types of animal abuse. In California and many other states, we have laws now that are starting to prohibit people from having an animal after they've been convicted of animal abuse, especially serious cases of animal abuse. I'm very much in favor of that. But without an animal abuse registry, how are people going to know? So right now in California, you can be convicted of felony animal abuse, and you can go into your local. Same person can go into most local government shelters and rescue groups and get another animal because none of those people can find out about it. And that is probably the most important part of these new animal abuse registries, is that when people are ordered by a judge to not have an animal, there literally is no system for enforcing that. These registries are the beginning of that. And in spite of all the issues and complications that I've talked about, I think overall it's a very critical thing that we have to do to protect animals.
Bob, we get the feeling around here also that people are ready for these, and we're looking forward to seeing how it plays out in Tennessee. We'll speak with you further about it once it gets going.
I think so, and I think that we all, no offense to people who live in Tennessee, but it's not a state that has been known to be a leader in animal rights and animal welfare, and I think it's very interesting and admirable that we're seeing states like this who are saying we're sick of it. And so I think that it's a really good sign for animals around the world.
We agree. Thanks so much, Bob.
You're welcome.